And welcome into another episode of the Flyers Files podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Durso. Coming up on today's show, drama in the locker room, comments from Sean Couturier and Matvei Michkov from after Saturday's overtime loss to Ottawa. Is there anything to this? We'll get into that. Defensemen turning heads, a couple of defensemen that I want to spotlight on this week's show. And later on also we'll have a tribute to Pelle Lindbergh 40 years after his tragic passing. So all that coming up. Before we jump into everything, remember to follow me at Kevin_Durso on all social media platforms, particularly the Twitter X platform for in-game updates, Instagram for any pre- and post-game videos that I've been making throughout the course of the season. You'll find all of that there. So that's the handle for that. Don't forget to also give a follow to at BFA Livestream on Twitter and BFA Live Sports. They're hosting all of this. You'll find this show on that platform, among others that I will plug at the end of the show as well. So all that, keep that in mind as we go through this show, and let's get right to it. And, you know, there's never a shortage of things happening in the world of the Flyers. There are times, especially maybe from my perspective, covering the team, having to deal with this day in, day out, that there's updates always, there's storylines always. And, you know, when you're in the media and you have to go and you cover all these home games, 41 home games a year, 82 games in a season, some of them blend together and there's good reason. And sometimes there's things that come up that either get overblown, maybe are bigger issues than they seem to be on the surface, all of the above, really. And there are times I feel that we try to take sports like this. You know, you can't live and die, you know, in a baseball season, it's 162 games. If you live and die by every single game, you're going to go crazy by the end of it. And the NHL and the NBA are very similar with the 82 game season, that you can't react the way that you would to an NFL game. But I feel like we try to make it that so often because in the NFL, it's a daily occurrence. Something happens every single day. And as such, I think we try to spotlight certain things. And there was an instance of this, in my opinion, with this whole Matvei Michkov, Sean Couturier thing. The Michkov thing in and of itself is really a big deal because of how he came into the season and the struggles at the start of the season. There was no hiding the fact that he did not get off to a good start production-wise. He was struggling to score goals, and the eye test upheld a lot of what was going on. He did not look like the player that people saw finish out the season really strong, end up with 26 goals to lead the team, finish with 63 points as a rookie. All of these positives that he finished the year on were kind of gone. And there was a lot of speculation as to why that could be. There were reports that he came into camp out of shape. Then there was this report of an ankle injury and what could be going on with that and how that may have slowed his progress in the offseason. He had catching up to do during camp, preseason, etc. And after so many games, it looked like, you know, he wasn't in the best condition. You come to last week, and we'll kind of begin this portion of it with the week that was and highlight a couple of things with the final scores and things like that, and then get into the story behind all of this. So the Flyers get a win on Thursday against the Nashville Predators. Michkov scores the goal that ties the game 1-1. They would eventually go on to win the game 3-1. Noah Cates got the game winner, and Travis Konechny scored an empty netter. Dan Vladar was in goal for that one, had 23 saves, gets the win. They play on Saturday against Ottawa, and again, you're down 2-0 early on in this game. You're looking for something to spark the team, and Michkov gets the first goal of the game. And now he's got goals in back-to-back games. And the goal against Ottawa in particular was straight out of last season. Muscles a guy off to maintain possession of the puck, gets to the middle of the ice, lets go a good shot, scores the goal. Third of the season, goals in back-to-back games. We're 15 games into the season at this point, and you're starting to feel like, okay, there it is. There's the guy that people want to see. And there really was nothing else to the rest of that game. The Flyers mostly dominated from there. They do eventually tie the game 2-2 midway through the third. Jamie Drysdale gets that goal. More on him later on in the show. And the Flyers look like they're going to probably find a way to win that game because Ottawa's just getting nothing. No offense, no shots, nothing. But it leaves you with that position, especially when you get to overtime, that one mistake could quite possibly be the end of this game. That if you make the next mistake, you'll lose a game that you seemed like you had total control over for the last 2 periods. And that's exactly what happened. Trevor Zegras doesn't commit to a line change. He kind of signals for one, then has to peel back. He tries to direct traffic with the coverage. Travis Sanheim goes and plays the puck carrier. Zegras is supposed to pick up the other guy. He's late, and Tim Stützle ends up on the back door for the game-winning goal, and they lose the game. And Zegras took that particularly hard, stayed in the locker room for a very long period of time. He wasn't one of the guys that was talked to after the game on Saturday. He was in there for a good period of time, just kind of sitting there still half dressed, skates still on, all that type of stuff, not kind of ready to call it a day because his mistake more or less cost them the game. So this gets us up to and sets the stage for the Michkov Couturier back and forth. And we're going to start this with Michkov because he's the one who spoke first that day. And I don't believe he was the first guy to go in general, but he was one of the first couple of players that was interviewed after the game on Saturday. And Michkov goes before Sean Couturier does. Couturier was almost directly after. And the gist of Michkov's whole thing was a lot of talk about how do you feel now? It feels like because the eye test is defending that he's coming out of whatever slow start he was on. Goals in back-to-back games, a lot more opportunities, scoring chances are up. He's possessing the puck more. He's doing things that help his line be more productive in general. It's all there. So we're seeing it take progression to him being the player that he was. And as this goes on, so he gets asked about how he's feeling, everything that goes into that, and where physically where he's at too. And the reason for the question being phrased that way is because there's this doubt, right? Like, one, did you come into camp? If you came into camp out of shape physically, you should be feeling better after some repetition with the season. If it was the ankle injury, are you feeling better physically from all of that you're now getting there? Like, do you feel like you're that player? And you'll hear Michkov answer the question and his translator, Slavik Kuznetsov, give the answer. And there's a couple of interesting things out of that I'm going to pull from this, but let's hear the audio first.
How do you feel physically compared to the start of the season?
Физически, как себя чувствуешь по отношению к началу сезона?
Честно, первый раз в жизни отдыхал 4 месяца.
Truly, first time I was rested for the 4 months.
Без хоккея.
No hockey.
Тренировки это все равно не то.
Training is not the same.
Поэтому где-то в начале сезона потерял какую-то концентрацию.
In the beginning of the season, lost concentration.
Но с каждой игрой все лучше и лучше себя чувствую.
With every game, feeling better and better.
Okay, so there's a couple of things to pull from that. The first part, it's right at the very beginning, and you kind of almost miss it a little bit because when you're going through a translator and things like that, there's elements of it that are broken up. But if you heard it clear enough, he talks about taking 4 months off. 4 months, no hockey. That's really interesting. And that's from all of the things that we're going to hear between these two players, that's the most eye-raising thing that I heard was 4 months, no hockey. Okay, so you took way more time off and you changed everything this past offseason and obviously came in not ready to go for a full 82. That's where that comes from. So obviously there's one layer to it. The other part of it, though, was about the concentration, that losing concentration in these games early on. That's another big thing to point out and to admit that I might not have been there fully. I might have mentally checked out a little bit. I wasn't concentrating on what I had to do. So now it's coming, but early in the season, it wasn't there. That is very interesting to hear from Michkov. It's an admission kind of to everything that's going on. So now we can kind of put some of the other stuff, but that doesn't mean there wasn't an ankle issue at some point, but it kind of puts that more to bed. It's really about you didn't play for a long period of time. And that's where this comes from. And he I think played on occasion. Like, it's not like he just didn't skate for 4 months straight. But if you're talking about the occasional one-off, I went to this event and I went to that event and I played in it, but I didn't really do that physical regimen that I'm supposed to go through all the time. The way that most players do, the way the players, particularly around here, there's a lot of players that stay around for a big chunk of the summer and just keep working. So that was really telling. And to me, having done this for as long as I have, like I said at the first episode of this podcast, I'm on my 12th season doing this. And I've heard a lot of interview clips, and I've stood in media scrums, and I've heard things that jump out to you. One of the ones that stands out to me was at the end of last season, toward the end of last season. I wasn't physically in the scrum, but again, when you're even hearing interview clips, when my colleagues who are on the road and are doing a game that's on the road that I'm not able to make it to or whatever, that they get something that is a clear soundbite that jumps out at you. Like John Tortorella after the Toronto game, then 2 days before he gets fired. There was something in there that obviously jumped out to everybody. You recognize it right away. That was the thing that jumped out to me. 4 months no hockey and lost concentration early in the year. So the rest of the media availability from there to me was perfectly normal. Nothing that seemed out of the ordinary, nothing that crazy, but there was a lot to be made of what Sean Couturier had to say in the days that followed this and the hours that followed this. Really, it started to pick up then. It really caught steam on kind of some off days here, a Sunday where they practiced, but nothing really was made of it. And then the off day, they had an off day on Monday. So all of these things factoring in and all of it stemming from more of what Sean Couturier had to say than what Michkov ultimately had to say. So let's go to the Couturier portion and we'll break that down in just a moment. So here's Sean Couturier following Saturday's game, and this is him you'll hear the questions, him being directly asked about Michkov. Take a listen.
Sean, Matvei was just saying that, he was feeling maybe some pressure to score a goal, and the goal in Nashville was a little bit of a weight off of him. What have you guys done to try to keep him sort of, on the level and keep his frustration levels low and confidence high as he's kind of worked through this?
Yeah, I think he's a great goal scorer and has a lot of skill. I think you just got to find a way to contribute to helping the team win in other ways when you're struggling. You're not always going to be scoring goals every game. So, I thought I've seen improvement in the way he's, not cheating as much and being on the right side of pucks. And, I'm sure it's a little different for him, but, if he sticks to playing, more the right way, I think it's going to be better for the team overall.
Have you sensed a weight off his shoulders a little bit after scoring that goal in Nashville and then tonight as well?
I think so. I think you can tell tonight he's trying to make a lot of plays with the puck, holding on to the puck. So yeah, I think he's definitely feeling good about himself.
All right, so that's Sean Couturier, and again, to me, there's nothing in there that I really hear that jumps out. It's a pretty standard answer. It's a little more elaborate than you get from a lot of players. Him talking a little bit more about him talking more about Michkov being a good goal scorer and the play away from the puck and all of that. That's a lot more detailed than you typically get. People seem to really run with this, though, that it was him that Couturier was calling out Michkov for the cheating at center ice and for, again, the play away from the puck, and that you have to do certain things and contribute in different ways when you're not scoring. And again, nothing to me about the way he's saying this jumps out that he's calling him out in an aggressive way or anything like that. He compliments him about, being a good goal scorer, having a lot of skill. There's areas to work on. He's growing. I do feel like he's had a weight lifted off his shoulders and he's continuing to get better, all of that. And it's totally valid to ask the captain of the team what he feels about this situation, or as the question was phrased, what are you guys doing to help him when he's not scoring? And while Couturier kind of doesn't answer that question specifically, there's enough there that you get the sense that it wasn't that big of a deal, but people really ran with it, and people were running with it for a variety of reasons. From, there's definitely, when you're the longest tenured Flyer and your tenure is defined by lack of success, a lot of people like to kind of come at Sean Couturier for just for existing during this period of time, for the injuries he's had to go through, for the recovery, for the decline he's had as a player since winning a Selke trophy because of those injuries. It just feels like there's enough people who kind of have something against the guy for not really meeting the contract number he has because of all of the circumstances that came after he signed that contract. That's number one. Number two is kind of this sense of don't, criticize anybody else you want to, but don't criticize Michkov, because that's the savior. That's the golden boy who comes in and is supposed to help everything. And I don't buy that. If he's struggling, he's struggling. And certainly from my position, whenever I would write something or anything like that, if I'm going to point out something, being honest about it. I'm not going to sugarcoat something because he's the future of the franchise or anything like that. So I don't see anything wrong with one of the players in the room having something to say about what he could do better and how he can help the team when he's not helping the team offensively as much. So certainly nothing wrong there. And then just in general, like, kind of people who, again, things where people were really grasping for things as the whole thing went on, feeling like Couturier's body language wasn't good in the video of him doing this interview, feeling like his body language on the bench was bad because of the offside and overtime that they had, where Michkov carries the puck in, made a move close to the blue line. Couturier goes in, he's offside. That looked more like Couturier being frustrated with himself than anything, to be honest. But, you point out that, look at the play that it's on. You kind of point out that, listen, he's either frustrated at himself or he's frustrated at Michkov. It's one of the two. And those things happen during the course of a game typically, and we don't see them happen. This one happened to be right there on camera. People kind of ran with it. There was also this narrative that people were saying that the team didn't seem as enthused about Michkov scoring a goal as they did Jamie Drysdale tying the game. Big difference between a game-tying goal in the third period when you've been dominating play and getting the first one down to nothing and knowing there's business still ahead before you go crazy about it. It all kind of just seemed like we're trying to stir up something that may not really exist. Couturier and Michkov have been together, obviously, since Michkov got here. They've played together a lot. Couturier has certainly been a mentor for him to a degree in terms of helping with that communication and the language barrier and all of that, and trying to explain things the best way possible so he goes out and improves as a player. By all accounts, everybody was talking about it at the practice the day after. They were doing this again. Couturier was over at the whiteboard with Michkov, with Rick Tocchet, as they explained something, and Couturier's seemed to be helping along right then and there. And it doesn't seem like there's any problem in the room based off of things like that, but it fuels the narrative to think that something's up with Sean Couturier and the way what he had to say and how he said that to the media and all of that. The bottom line is, win that game in overtime, lose that game in overtime. The team is 8-5-2 through 15 games, which is, I'm sure, given the quality of opponents they had coming out of the gate, playing Florida twice, Winnipeg was on the schedule. All these types of teams, right? And the games that they've had to play so far, and all the playoff teams from last year they had to play, and all the times that they've won games, found a way to win a game, maybe gotten an extra point out of it, maybe in getting the extra point came very close to getting the second one. Whatever it may be, they're right there with all these other teams, and you're 15 games in. You are rapidly coming up on the quarter mark of the season. And as such, it feels like that should be the encouraging thing right now, that they're 8-5-2, and it's probably better than what you expected. But we're trying to stir up drama that may not really exist because of what Sean Couturier said and how detailed he was in his answer, and it coming fresh off of Michkov speaking and saying that he basically didn't skate for 4 months or didn't play any sort of hockey for 4 months as part of his offseason and lost his concentration in earlier games. That, to me, was more about the admission from the player who hasn't looked as good versus what the captain of the team has to say. And that, to me, made this a really big overblown issue. And you really just, now you hope that everybody comes out and has a really good game, practice this week as they get ready for their next little round of games here. Sean Couturier and Matvei Michkov were line mates. That we'll see how that goes, and hopefully maybe the first game out is a really good one for those guys so that it kind of silences all of this. If Michkov's putting up points and continues to be productive and do what he needs to do, then that's great. If he kind of goes into a slump, we can kind of circle back to this and see this as a turning point. But if he continues to be trending upward and contributing points, then I don't see what this has to do with anything if he continues to play well. let's go into our next discussion topic. And I want to talk about two defensemen in particular that I feel like not only have had a great week, but kind of had beyond that a great season to this point. And Cam York and Jamie Drysdale are two guys to me that have really stepped it up. And we've seen it over recent years where Travis Sanheim, his evolution as a defenseman and kind of being thrown into a more significant role, how that's kind of come around and he's evolved into a player. Like it's starting to become with Sanheim. You know, Sanheim was on the Four Nations roster for Canada last year, and it felt a little bit like, well, he's on the roster, but that does, he's not in every game. He's probably more of a fringe player for that roster. He's not exactly a lock. And now most of the projections that you see have him in there, and have actually the other Flyer who made the Four Nations roster for Canada, Travis Konechny, almost not even on the map for it anymore. Whereas Sanheim is starting to solidify himself into not only being on the roster, but being a guy who probably is going to play regularly. That's pretty outstanding for him. York and Drysdale to start this season are having years that you can be very encouraged by because of their performance. Certainly a sign of their growth as they're both younger players. It's very important to see them start to build on this. And I want to start with Cam York because York really came out of the gate when he came back from injury. He missed the first 3 games. He comes back and he starts play in the 4th game of the season, which was the second home game. And, nearly a point per game player at this point, a goal and 8 assists for 9 points in 12 games. But to me, one of the things that stands out is, so Travis Sanheim is top 5 consistently right now, top 5 in the league in average time on ice per game. He's at 26.05. He's 3rd in the league. Cam York, for lack of games played, obviously, based on this, is at 24.49 average per game, which is 10th in the league. It's more than names like Rasmus Dahlin, Josh Morrissey, Charlie McAvoy, Roman Josi, before he was injured, was not playing that much. Adam Fox hasn't gone above an average of 24 minutes at this point. So you've got players like that. Here's another one of the top young defensemen in the league, Evan Bouchard for Edmonton, 23-33. These are guys that, you expect to get the big minutes, and it's not about them right now. You see 2 Flyers in the top 10 of average time on ice, and they're not getting completely blown up out there. That's a huge sign of success. And York has been, in particular, really good since coming back. More noticeable on the offensive side, which wasn't always, hasn't always been his strongest suit. It was in college, it was in World Junior Championships that he was able to contribute offensively a little more. He's been more of I don't want to call him a stay-at-home guy, but he's focused a lot more on the defensive side of things in his NHL career. If that offensive side can come out, and 2 years ago it really was, now you're starting to see some of that return. It's very encouraging for him. And then Jamie Drysdale is the other guy I want to talk about. And he's not up in the top 50 even of guys with average time on ice. But he's at 22 minutes a game. He's at 22.06 per game, which is pretty substantial when you're not playing the typical top minutes. Drysdale doesn't touch the ice during penalty kills. York typically doesn't either, but York could. Sanheim definitely does, both sides of the equation. So you've got Drysdale, who plays only one side of special teams, not the top pair guy, so he's not out there against the top guys of the other side particularly, and he's still coming in at over 22 minutes a game. And more than that, he's had a few games, especially the game on Saturday, where he is playing so much more. He had in Saturday's game, he had 24:35 of ice time, which is pretty heavy minutes there. It's way more than typical. When they played Montreal and the game goes to overtime and eventually a shootout, 25-44 that night. And there are games where he doesn't play as much for whatever reason. Against Toronto, he only played 18:08. Against Nashville on Thursday, he played 20:34, which is below his average for the season, but pretty typical of a second pairing guy. It's not like you have to be at close to 25 a night, but he's had a handful of games where he plays upwards of that much. and then games where he typically falls in around his typical number. And to see two of those games come in pretty short order here, where he breaks, the game against Montreal was his highest ice time of the season. The game against Ottawa is right up there. It might be number 2, actually, as a matter of fact. And to do that now, to continue to evolve into that, is pretty substantial. Drysdale's also got some offensive numbers that are starting to pick up as well. He's going to come into Wednesday's game on a 3-game point streak. Both of his goals have come over the last 6 games played. So he's got 4 of his 7 points in both goals in the last 6 games. So he's picking it up offensively a little bit more. And, again, one of the things about Drysdale is that where you come from follows you, and how you got here follows you. And he's here because of the Cutter-Gauthier trade. And to start to see his play kind of finally hit that gear, he gets traded here 2 seasons ago in the midseason, obviously. Makes a bit of an immediate impact, but not great. Also hurt himself at one point during the course of that, so he missed a little bit of time. Then last season, it's not completely there. You see it. You see him trying to get there, and some of that had to do with his coach, right? Like when you come into a John Tortorella coach team, you're going to focus more on the defensive side, and if you've got the offensive chops, which Drysdale does have, you lose that a little bit because you have to focus on the defensive side, or else, who knows what happens to you when you're coached by Tortorella. There's a lot less of that. Drysdale's able to kind of do his thing a little bit more, and you're seeing it really come to fruition, how he is playing at a level that is so encouraging. And, okay, York had one of these seasons 2 years ago and is now seemingly finding it again, which is good. Drysdale seems like he's finding it now, and these are younger guys. Drysdale, you get Drysdale, however, a couple of years ago, he comes in at 21. He's 23 now. There's a lot of time still for him to develop even further, and this is just a great stepping stone for him to keep taking things and moving them forward. York's not really that far ahead, in this case. York's 24, and he'll turn 25 middle of this season, but he's going to be entering those critical years, and it feels like right now he's coming into the spot that you want him to be the player that you hope he would be when you drafted him. It feels like that's coming together a little bit more every single time that this goes, every single time he's out there with all these games this particular season. It just feels like it's working out for him. And if you can kind of come away from this, like, some of these guys didn't have their best games against Ottawa. And it was interesting because one of the better defensemen against Ottawa was Noah Juleson, who hasn't really stood out positively or negatively through most of it. I mean, he's been okay. And for a third pairing guy, that's totally okay. But he really had a noticeable game, and it feels like he's kind of started to solidify his role. Nick Seeler gives you what you expect from Nick Seeler. So that's there. They seem comfortable now with Emile Andre playing pretty regularly in the other spot. And as they solidify these roles, the big thing for me is Sanheim, you know what you're getting from him typically. If you can start to anticipate every game you go into that this is the Cam York you're going to get, this is the Jamie Drysdale you're going to get, you start to figure out that your top 4 is a lot more figured out than most teams can say. And that's really a big step in terms of progress and being able to move forward in this development the way you want to. You may still go out there and look for another guy to join your top 4 or your top pair and really evolve that blue line core into something that you feel is meant for a contender. But you're feeling pretty good about what you've seen from those 3 guys. Sanheim obviously has ramped it up over the years. York looks like he's back to the form of 2 years ago. Drysdale looks like he's at the absolute best that I think we've seen him since getting here in the trade. And you have maybe 2 veterans, with Seeler and Juleson at the back of that defensive core that are providing what you would expect from them. And if Andre can kind of fill that missing piece, even if it's just for now or who knows, that's pretty big to feel like you have 6 guys that you can lean on defensively while getting everything else, while going through all of the other parts of your lineup and still trying to figure out the forward group a little bit, because your goaltending's been pretty good throughout the course of the season. If you can figure out your defensive core, then you can try to align the forwards a little bit more. It all would make sense for what you're trying to build towards. And it's really impressive to watch these two guys, especially for how young they are, especially for what they mean to the future. It's really impressive to watch these guys start to take those steps. So it's encouraging. Keep an eye on them going forward. They've had great success so far, and I think it's only going to continue as we keep moving forward in this, as we watch this season, because they've done a lot of the foundational work. It's leading to more offense for them, and they certainly seem like they're different players so far this year. So certainly something to keep an eye on. Before we get to our final segment, we're going to actually kind of switch things up a little bit. We're going to do the 3 stars first, and then we'll get into the final segment. So here we go. The Flyers 3 stars of the week coming at you. And we're going to start with the 3rd star, and that's Dan Vladar. Vladar only got into 1 of the 2 games this week, so not a lot to go off of, but wins the game, gave up 1 goal, .958 save percentage from that game. As I said, 23 of 24. Looked like the typical bounce-back game you would expect from Dan Vladar. He's been so solid so far this season. You know, we'll see what kind of lineup they roll out with the goalies going forward. They have a back-to-back this weekend, which we'll get to. That's going to be part of it. I'm sure you're going to see Sam Ersson in one of those, but I wouldn't be surprised if Vladar gets the other 2. And then, you know, another sizable gap that will come as the team moves forward with the schedule. But Vladar, with that outstanding game in Nashville, really helping keep the team in the game until they could get the lead, and then defending the lead. He's the number 3 star of the week. Star number 2 is going to go to Cam York. And York, I thought, impressive week overall, just his play by the eye test and all of that. He also had 2 assists in the win against Nashville, which also add to this. So the 2 assists plus 3 from the week. He was really solid throughout the course of it. And because of that, I definitely put him high on the list for this. That's why he's going to be my 2nd star of the week. And my 1st star of the week, Matvei Michkov. The goals in back-to-back games, both kind of coming at critical times. One ties a game, one brings the Flyers back to within 1, gets them on the board. There is only 2 points of the week, and he was only a +1, so it's not like it was his line that was dominating by any stretch, but he's starting to take steps to looking like that player that everybody wants to see him put up the points, to make some of the plays that he's capable of making. He's taking steps in the right direction. So Matvei Michkov, my number 1 star of the week. So finally, our last segment, and this is not to close it out on a bit of a somber note, but it's something that an anniversary that's highlighted every year in Flyers history, but this year in particular, because it happens to be the 40th anniversary of Pelle Lindbergh's passing. And Pelle Lindbergh, who was involved in the car accident that ultimately took his life on the early morning hours of November 10th, was when the accident happened. He was officially pronounced dead on November 11th, and that's the day he did die ultimately. But he was 26 years old, and really was on top of the hockey world at the time, especially among goaltenders. The reigning Vezina winner at the time, and that day in particular in 1985 lives in Flyers history. Nobody has worn the number 31 since. It's an kind of unofficially retired number. There may be a push to officially retire it and a push to put him in the Flyers Hall of Fame. There's a whole bunch of conversations that happen around him, and we'll see if those really start to take shape. But everybody knows something about this story, and this year in particular, there's a few reasons why it carries so much weight. Number 1, it's a round number. You get to an anniversary like 40 years. There's a long history of people who find out more about this story, who grow up as fans of the team. Certainly in my case, never saw Pelle Lindbergh play, wasn't alive when he was playing or anything like that, but know the story because it's lived on in Flyers history. Another big reason why it's so meaningful this year in particular is at the time in 1985-86, Bernie Parent was the Flyers goaltending coach and was really more than that to Pelle Lindbergh. This was a great friend, a mentor, and it was Pelle's idol. And in the months, the weeks and months that we have right now following Bernie Parent's passing at the age of 80, and knowing that is part of this time around, that this year Bernie is no longer with us either, that holds a lot of weight based on how much Bernie meant to Pelle Lindbergh. So that's certainly a significant thing. And even little things, when the Flyers take the ice on Wednesday night and for their next game, they're going to play the same team that the Flyers of the 85-86 season played in the first game after Pelle Lindbergh's passing, the Edmonton Oilers. And it's going to come right in the same time frame of the year, obviously. That game in 85 was November 14th, and the Flyers did win that game 5-3, by the way. But you're going to play that same team. One of the players on that 85-86 team was Rick Tocchet, who was all of 21 years old at the time, and going through something, probably a tragedy unlike anything he would have ever experienced at that time in his life. And now he's the guy behind the bench. It's not like, there's a tie, there's a direct tie right there. And those things are just kind of make it seem a lot more meaningful. And then you throw in the documentary, which, the Swede of Philadelphia documentary, Charlie Mins, the director and producer of it. I encourage everybody to go see it because it's certainly a great, if nothing else, it's a great history lesson, but you're going to get even more out of that from something like this, a documentary that highlights all of the stories behind it, the interviews that were done for this. Even if you've just seen some of the preview clips, there's already so much that you can take away from just those. And this is a full-length documentary. So I encourage people to go. In fact, the documentary, which was supposed to run for a week over the course of basically this past week, it started November 7th. It was going to run for until November 13th, I believe. It actually just got extended another week in several local theaters in the Philadelphia area. So if you are able to go see this, it certainly honors an important part of Flyers history. It kind of ties in some of those other elements. Rick Tocchet is featured in the documentary doing interviews. Bernie Parent is featured in it and was part of this documentary before he passed away. So there's a lot of things with that. And I think it's a really important story. It's a really important piece of Flyers history. And so I encourage people to go see the documentary. Think about Pelle as you're maybe watching the game on Wednesday night or anything like that. And just think about all the impact he had. Pelle Lindbergh, the player that he was, the guy that what people, look for now in a goaltender in terms of that level that he was hitting. He had the numbers obviously to back it up. Second round pick, 87, 49, and 15 record in his career. And the goals against and the save percentage look a little different from that era. The 80s were a very high scoring period. You were a really solid goaltender if you were even in the lower threes. You had a solid goals against, like that 302 in his Vezina Trophy winning year. Bronze medal from the 1980 Olympics, All-Star twice, posthumously voted to the 1986 NHL All-Star game as well, which is an honor that you don't see that happen very often, where somebody has such an impact on the game that's part of it as well. So certainly an important day in Flyers history, and it's a significant anniversary for it. And just wanted to bring some attention to that before we wrap the show, because obviously there's a lore around Pelle Lindbergh. It's not, like we said, his name may not be in the rafters. He's not in the Flyers Hall of Fame, but his story has lived on for 4 decades. The legend of the number that he wore that nobody else has worn since, that lives on. And if it ever does become formally, officially retired, we'll see if that actually happens. But it certainly seems like there's at least a quiet honoring of Pelle by no one's worn the number since. So for 40 years, you have not seen a number 31 in orange and black for the Flyers. And that has everything to do with what kind of went on following this tragedy and this dedication to preserving that number for him. So certainly just wanted to touch on that. I wrote an article about it on 973ESPN.com and wanted to highlight that anniversary because it is very significant, obviously. So, as we get ready to move on to the week ahead and start to look at what's coming, again, we pay tribute to Pelle Lindbergh, his memory, and everything that's happened over the course of 40 years, the evolution of the game, the evolution of how everything has changed. You see different things with goaltenders. Like one of the interesting facts I find about Pelle Lindbergh is he was only 5'9". Can you imagine a guy 5'9" in today's NHL playing, when you see the way some of these goaltenders are built, and you think about some of these guys that the Flyers have had over the years, these really tall goaltenders that stand 6'5", 6'6", 6'7", and take up most of the net. Lindbergh was playing at an elite level, winning the Vezina Trophy, and was among the shorter players in the league, obviously. So just something to consider, and obviously, again, to honor the memory of Pelle Lindbergh, who has a very historic and important place in Flyers history. So let's move on to the look ahead, and we will talk about the upcoming schedule here. And this is this week for you. You've got Wednesday night, 7:30 start, Flyers Oilers. Friday night, 8 o'clock start, Flyers at the St. Louis Blues. And Saturday, that's also an 8 o'clock start, Flyers at the Dallas Stars. So 3 Western Conference matchups this week to kind of see where the Flyers match up with some of those teams. St. Louis is kind of lower in the standings. Edmonton's had some ups and downs this season. So has Dallas, ultimately. But 2 good tests when you think about where Edmonton and Dallas were in the playoff picture last year. Both of them teams that have made significant runs in the playoffs. So they're always good tests for where the Flyers stand. And that certainly will be a couple of them there. That's going to just about do it for us. Quick reminder, our next episode will come next week. Same time as always, Wednesday morning, November 19th, 11 a.m. That's when you can catch the next episode of Flyers Files. So as we get ready to get out of here, once again, just want to remind everybody where you can find me, where you can find more about the show, and then go into some of the other shows that we have to offer as well. So once again, follow my coverage of the Flyers this week, the 3 games, and anything else that may come up at Kevin_Durso on the Twitter X platform, at Kevin_Durso on Instagram and TikTok for the pre and post game videos. If you want to get more information leading into those games, in addition to the writing. And then don't forget to follow at BFA Livestream and the BFA Live Sports channel and all of those for all of the shows that we've got going on here. It's more than just the Flyers Files podcast. It is covering all of the bases when it comes to the Philadelphia sports market. You've got Nick Earnshaw's show, Earnshaw Radio, which really highlights just about everything out there. He's talked about all of the teams on his show. And then you've got the 2 shows dedicated to the Phillies and the Sixers, the Now Batting for the Phillies podcast with Mike Gill and Bob Wankel. Mike and Bob chats about baseball. They're always informative, and it's going to be an interesting offseason for them, so be sure to follow along for that. And you've got the Trust the Mikes podcast, Mike Gill and MKB, doing more with talking about the Sixers. The Sixers have gotten off to a good start as well this season, so you got to give some attention to them as well. They've surprised some people with their record, just like the Flyers have a little bit. So be sure to check out all the shows on this platform as we continue to evolve this and continue to dedicate more time to it. It's going to, we're going to be with you the whole way through on all of this, whether you're following along with the Phillies off season, the Sixers season, me with the Flyers season. Nick's got you covered for every team's season so far, and more to come. So stay tuned. There's a lot of great things happening, and be sure to take all the steps necessary. Like, comment, subscribe on YouTube, follow along on the Twitter X platform and social media, and just stick with us, because we're trying to build something great here, and I hope that you'll join us for the ride on that as much as you will on the ride for the seasons for all of these teams. So gearing up, like we said, gearing up for 3 games this week from the Flyers. You can catch all of that at coverage on 97.3ESPN.com. Follow me on Twitter X at Kevin_Durso, and we'll be back in a week with another episode of the Flyers Files podcast. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.